The numbers on the gas pump display clicked over with a sickening, final-sounding tick. 48.73. 48.74. Each cent was a tiny hammer blow against the fragile shell of Isla's composure. The midday sun beat down on the cracked asphalt of the desolate station, the heat shimmering in waves that made the world warp and wobble. Her head swam, a dizzying cocktail of exhaustion, dehydration, and the acrid bite of gasoline fumes. She gripped the nozzle, her knuckles white, her body swaying. Just hold on. Just a few more seconds. The automatic shut-off would click, and she could get back in the car, back to the sweltering apartment, back to the endless cycle. Her son, Noah, was with a neighbor. He needed dinner. The fridge was a monument to emptiness, save for a half-empty carton of milk and a wilting celery stalk. This $50 was supposed to be for groceries. But the needle on the fuel gauge had been resting on E for 2 terrifying days, and her job was a 30-mile commute she couldn't afford to lose. So gas it was. The world tilted again, more sharply this time. The rhythmic thumping in her ears wasn't just her own pulse. It was something else, a deep, guttural rumble that vibrated through the soles of her worn-out sneakers. It grew louder, a rolling thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. Isla squeezed her eyes shut, trying to focus. The rumble resolved into the distinct, syncopated roar of multiple V-twin engines. A shadow fell over her. She pried her eyes open and saw them. A phalanx of motorcycles, chrome and black leather, had pulled into the station, surrounding the pumps like a pack of steel wolves. Patches adorned their vests, skeletal figures, and cryptic lettering she couldn't decipher through the black spots dancing in her vision. Hell's Angels. The name screamed in her mind, a jolt of pure, primal fear that momentarily cleared the fog. She'd heard stories, grim tales whispered in hushed tones. They were trouble. They were violence. Her hand trembled, and the gas nozzle felt impossibly heavy. The lead biker swung a leg over his machine, a massive Harley that gleamed with menacing perfection. He was a mountain of a man, his arms a tapestry of intricate tattoos, his face framed by a grizzled beard. A patch over his heart read, Riker. He didn't look at her, not at first. His gaze swept the station, a general assessing his territory. But then his eyes, sharp and intelligent, settled on her. They missed nothing. The tremor in her hand, the pale, hollowed-out look of her face, the way she swayed on her feet like a sapling in a hurricane. He took a step forward, his boots crunching on stray gravel. Beside him, another biker, broad as a refrigerator and with a beard that seemed to have its own gravitational pull, muttered something. This one, whose vest named him Grizz, had a surprisingly observant look in his eyes. It was Grizz who had first pointed. Hey, Prez, check out the lady at pump 3. She's looking ghost white. Riker's attention had snapped to her then. He saw more than a woman pumping gas. He saw the frayed cuffs of her cheap blouse, the ancient, dented sedan with one mismatched hubcap, the frantic, hunted look in her eyes that he'd seen once before, a lifetime ago, in a mirror that reflected his own sister's face. The world narrowed to a pinprick of light. The roar of the engines faded into a dull drone. The final sound Isla heard before the blackness swallowed her whole was the sharp, metallic click of the gas pump shutting off, the total flashing a mocking $5,112, and a deep, gravelly voice commanding, Grizz, get some water. Now, she didn't feel the ground rush up to meet her, but she felt the strong, surprisingly gentle arms that caught her before she hit the filthy concrete. The last sensation was the smell of worn leather and engine oil, a strangely comforting scent in the encroaching void. Riker held the woman, surprised by how light she was, like a bird with hollow bones. Her breath was a shallow whisper against his leather vest. He looked down at her face, now peaceful in unconsciousness, and the anger that was his constant companion began to smolder. It wasn't directed at her. It was an old, familiar rage, aimed at a world that could grind a person down until they simply collapsed at a gas pump over $50 worth of fuel. He carefully lowered her to the ground, propping her head on a rolled-up jacket one of his brothers provided without being asked. Grizz was already there, unscrewing the cap from a bottle of water, his large, clumsy-looking fingers surprisingly deft. "She's burning up," Grizz noted, touching the back of his hand to her forehead. "And skinny. Real skinny," Riker nodded, his jaw tight. He looked at her car. The back window had a small, crayon-drawn picture of a stick-figure family taped to the inside. A mom and a little boy holding hands under a smiling sun. The drawing was a gut punch. This wasn't just a woman. This was a mother. His mind flashed back, an unwelcome phantom from the past. His sister, Dana, trying to smile, her own face pale and drawn after a 16-hour shift, insisting she was fine, that she could handle it. He hadn't seen the truth until it was too late. He wouldn't make that mistake again. "Someone check her wallet. ID only. We need a name," Riker commanded, his voice low and firm. Another biker, younger, with Rook on his vest, gently retrieved the worn wallet from her back pocket. He pulled out a driver's license. "Isla. Isla Reyes," Rook announced, reading the name. "Address is over in the Millgate Apartments." Riker knew the place. Low-income housing, barely maintained, a place where hope went to die. He looked at the gas pump. $5,112. He pulled a thick roll of cash from his own pocket, peeled off a $100 bill, and handed it to the bewildered station attendant who had been watching from the safety of his booth. "Fill her tank. The rest is for you." "Keep your mouth shut," the attendant nodded, eyes wide. Riker then turned his attention back to Isla as she began to stir, her eyelids fluttering. He knelt beside her, his large frame blocking the harsh sun. "Easy now," he said, his voice softer than anyone would have believed possible. "You just took a little fall. You're all right." Isla's eyes focused on the face above her. The tattoos, the beard, the stern expression. Fear, cold and immediate, shot through her. A Hell's Angel. She was on the ground, surrounded. She tried to scramble back, a panicked gasp escaping her lips. "It's okay," Riker said again, holding up a hand, palm open. "We're not going to hurt you. You passed out. Just breathe." Grizz offered her the water bottle. "Hydrate, little mama. You cook yourself." Isla stared at the bottle, then at the circle of imposing figures. They weren't jeering. They weren't threatening. Their expressions were a mixture of concern and curiosity. She slowly, hesitantly, took the bottle and drank, the cool water a balm to her parched throat. She sat up, her head still pounding. "My car. My son. Car's getting a full tank," Riker stated simply. "Where's your boy?" "With a neighbor," she whispered, shame washing over her. I have to pick him up. We'll make sure you get there," Riker said. It wasn't a question. It was a declaration. He stood and looked at his men. There were 24 of them at the station, the rest of the chapter spread out on the highway, waiting. A silent communication passed between them. This was more than a fainting spell. This was a problem, and they were the ones who solved problems. "Grizz, you and Rook ride with her. Follow her home. Make sure she and the kid are secure for the night. I want a full report by morning. What's her story? Who's got her this wound up? Day. I want to know everything." Grizz nodded, the grim set of his jaw indicating he understood the gravity of the task. This was a rescue, and it had only just begun. The first step was getting her home. The next, as Riker already knew with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, would be tearing down whatever, or whoever, had put her on that concrete. For Riker, this was no longer just a woman at a gas station. It was a ghost of his past, a chance for a different outcome. It was a promise he'd made to his sister's memory, that he would never again stand by and watch someone be crushed by the world. The roar of 185 motorcycles was a promise, a threat, and a declaration of war all rolled into one. And it was all for her. Isla drove home in a surreal daze, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Her ancient sedan, now with a full tank of gas for the first time in over a year, felt strangely powerful, almost alien. In her rearview mirror, 2 motorcycles kept a steady, protective distance. The riders, Grizz and Rook, were dark, leather-clad guardian angels she never asked for. The fear had subsided, replaced by a profound, bewildering confusion. Why were they helping her? People like her were invisible. They were the background noise of society, the ones who struggled in silence, too proud or too tired to ask for help. When she pulled into the crumbling parking lot of the Millgate Apartments, they parked their bikes, the engines cutting out with a final, throaty cough, leaving an unnerving silence. Grizz walked with her to the door of her neighbor's apartment, his presence so large it seemed to block out the setting sun. He waited patiently as she collected Noah, a bright-eyed 5-year-old who stared in awe at the giant, bearded man. "Whoa, Mommy, is he a pirate?" Noah whispered loudly. A deep chuckle rumbled in Grizz's chest. "Something like that, little man." Back in her own apartment, the oppressive heat and the scent of worry hit her like a physical blow. The place was tidy but threadbare. The furniture was second-hand and sagging. The linoleum in the kitchen was peeling, and a single air conditioning unit in the window rattled uselessly. Grizz and Rook stood in the doorway, too large for the small space. "You got food in here?" Grizz asked, his eyes scanning the bare countertops. Isla's face flushed with humiliation. "We're fine. Thank you for the help, but we're fine." Grizz exchanged a look with Rook. It was a look that said, "She's not fine, look, lady." "Isla," Grizz said, his tone softening slightly. "Riker, our president, he doesn't do things by half. He sent us to make sure you're okay. And you're not okay. Not by a long shot. So just let us do our thing." Before she could protest, Rook was on his phone. 20 minutes later, 2 more bikers arrived, their arms laden with grocery bags. Not just staples, but fresh fruit, meat, juice boxes for Noah, even a bag of chocolate chip cookies. They filled her empty fridge and cupboards without a word, their movements efficient and practiced. Noah's eyes were like saucers as he watched a man with a skull tattoo on his neck carefully place a carton of ice cream in the freezer. Isla sank on her worn-out sofa, overwhelmed. Tears she had held back for months began to fall, silent tracks on her dusty cheeks. This kindness from such an unexpected source was more than she could process. Grizz knelt in front of her, his expression uncharacteristically gentle. "We're going to get to the bottom of this," he said quietly. "Whatever's got you running on empty, we're going to fix it. That's a promise from the club." He and Rook left soon after, stationing themselves in the parking lot below, their bikes silent sentinels in the growing darkness. Isla fed Noah a real dinner for the first time in weeks, and as she tucked him into bed, he hugged her tightly. "Are the pirates going to stay, Mommy?" "I don't know, baby," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "I really don't know." Later that night, in the smoky back room of the Hells Angels clubhouse, Riker listened intently as Grizz gave his report. The room was filled with the chapter's core members, a council of hardened men who had seen every form of human ugliness. "It's bad, Prez," Grizz said, leaning forward. "The apartment is clean, but it's empty. She's got nothing. The kid's healthy, but he's thin. She's proud, tried to tell me they were fine, but she was crying when we left. She's on the edge of a cliff, and the wind is blowing hard." Riker nodded slowly, a storm gathering in his eyes. "What else?" "I ran her plates," Rook added, looking up from a laptop. "Car's registered to her, but there's a lien on it. A big one. From a place called Croft Financial Services. Same place has a lien against most of her possessions, according to a quick public records search. This guy Croft owns her." The name Croft made Riker's jaw clench. Gideon Croft. He was a predator of a different sort. Not a street thug, but a man in a suit who used contracts and interest rates as his weapons. He was a loan shark with a license, preying on the desperate, bleeding them dry with exorbitant fees and impossible terms until he owned every part of their lives. "He's a leech." Another member, a grizzled ex-accountant named Numbers, grunted. "I've heard of him. He targets single mothers, people who've lost their jobs, gets them on a small loan, then buries them in penalties. It's legal, but it's filthy." Riker stood up and began to pace, the floorboards groaning under his weight. The image of Isla's pale face, the crayon drawing in her car, his sister's tired smile, it all coalesced into a single, burning point of rage. This wasn't just about money. It was about power. It was about a man like Croft deriving pleasure and profit from slowly extinguishing the hope in someone like Isla. A flashback, sharp and unwelcome, ambushed him. Dana, his younger sister, sitting at his kitchen table years ago, Stacks of envelopes spread before her. She was a single mother, too, after her husband had run off. She was working 2 jobs, trying to keep her head above water. She'd taken out a small loan to fix her car. He'd offered to help, but she was proud, just like Isla. "I can handle it, Ree," she'd said, forcing a smile. "I'm not a charity case." He had respected her pride, backed off, given her space. It was the biggest mistake of his life. The debt spiraled. The threats started. The loan company repossessed her car, and she lost one of her jobs. The weight became too much. He found her a week later, the letters and the final notices scattered around her like fallen leaves. The club had helped him hunt down the man responsible, a bottom feeder like Croft, and they had delivered their own brand of justice. But it didn't bring Dana back. It only left him with a hollow ache and a vow. "He thinks it's legal," Riker said, his voice a low growl that silenced the room. "We'll show him a different kind of law." He turned to face his men, his eyes blazing with cold fire. "This isn't just about Isla Reyes anymore. This is about every person a maggot like Croft has ever stepped on. We're going to push her life back on track, and we're going to do it by derailing his." The plan began to form, not just a rescue, but a reckoning. "Numbers. I want everything you can find on Croft's business. Every asset, every partner, every dirty little secret. I want leverage. Rook, you and your tech guys, I want his digital life. Emails, servers, everything. Grizz, you're on personal surveillance. I want to know where he eats, where he sleeps, and who he talks to. I want to know what he fears." The men nodded, a silent, unified assent. This was their purpose, the core of their twisted code. They were the monsters who hunted other monsters. "The rest of you," Riker continued, his gaze sweeping the room, "will be the muscle. Croft is goons. He'll use them when he feels threatened. We'll be ready." He walked to a large map on the wall, a map of the city. He picked up a red pin and drove it into the location of Croft Financial Services, a high-rise office downtown. Phase 1 was stabilization. That's done. Phase 2 is reconnaissance. That starts now. Phase 3, he said, tapping the pin with a thick finger, is extraction. We're going to extract Isla Reyes from his control permanently. And we're going to make sure Gideon Croft understands what happens when you poke the hornet's nest. The men in the room felt the familiar thrill, the righteous anger that bound them together. They were the Hell's Angels. They were feared, reviled, and misunderstood. But tonight, they were an army of avenging angels, roaring down the highway of justice for a single mother they had never met, ready to burn down the world to give her back her life. The next morning, Isla woke up to the smell of coffee. For a moment, she was disoriented. She hadn't been able to afford coffee in months. Then the events of the previous day rushed back. The collapse, the bikers, the groceries. She walked into her small kitchen to find a large, insulated carafe on the counter with a note taped to it, written in surprisingly neat block letters. "A mom needs her fuel too." Grizz outside, in the parking lot, a different motorcycle was parked in the same spot, its rider leaning against it, reading a newspaper. They'd stayed all night. A wave of something she couldn't name, gratitude, fear, a strange sense of safety, washed over her. She had to go to work. She was a data entry clerk at a sterile, soulless logistics company, a job that paid just enough to keep her and Noah in a state of perpetual crisis. The job itself wasn't the problem. The problem was Gideon Croft. He wasn't just her creditor. Through a complex web of shell corporations, he was also her employer. She had taken a small, emergency loan from him a year ago when Noah had pneumonia and she'd missed 2 weeks of work. The initial $2,000 had ballooned, through predatory interest rates and manufactured late fees, into an insurmountable $30,000 debt. He owned her. He made that clear. He'd arranged this job for her, and the majority of her paycheck was automatically garnished to service her debt, leaving her with crumbs. Complaining or quitting was not an option. He'd threatened to ruin her credit forever, to have her evicted, to make sure she could never get another job in the city. He was a smiling predator in a $1,000 suit. As she got ready, her mind raced. What would he do if he found out about the bikers? The thought sent a chill down her spine. She dressed Noah, gave him a breakfast of fresh fruit and cereal, a luxury that made her want to weep, and walked him to her neighbor's door. The biker in the lot, a man she didn't know, gave her a curt nod as she got into her car. He fell in behind her as she drove, a silent, rumbling shadow. Meanwhile, the Angel's machine was in full motion. Grizz, parked in a discreet van across the street from Croft's high-rise office building, watched the man himself arrive. Croft was exactly as Riker had described, slick, polished, with a predatory smile that didn't reach his cold, empty eyes. He moved with an unearned arrogance, a man who believed himself untouchable. Grizz spoke into a small microphone clipped to his collar. The shark has entered the aquarium. In the clubhouse, Rook and his team were already deep inside Croft's digital world. They had bypassed the slick corporate firewall with surprising ease. "This guy's arrogant," Rook muttered to Numbers, who was poring over financial statements on another screen. "His server security is a joke. He spent all his money on the fancy lobby. They found what they were looking for almost immediately. A separate, encrypted set of files. A ledger. It wasn't just Isla Reyes. It was hundreds of names, a litany of desperation. Each name was attached to a story of exploitation, a cycle of debt designed to be inescapable. They were his cash cows, his stable of indentured servants. He's not just a lone shark," Numbers growled, his face grim. "He's running a modern-day slavery ring. He gets them in debt, finds them jobs at companies he controls, garnishes their wages, and keeps them trapped. It's a closed loop. Isla is just one of many." Riker listened, his expression hardening into granite. "Does he have enforcers?" "Looks like it," Rook said, pulling up another file. "He has a security firm on a permanent retainer. Ex-cons and hired muscle. A guy named Cade seems to be the head goon. Nasty piece of work. Multiple assault charges, all dropped. He'll send them after her when he finds out we're involved," Riker predicted. "He'll see it as one of his assets being threatened. He'll try to intimidate her, remind her who's in charge." The call came to Isla's desk phone around noon. The caller ID was blocked. "Isla Reyes," she answered, her voice professional. "Well, hello, Isla." Gideon Croft's smooth, venomous voice slithered through the receiver. "I was just reviewing your file. It seems you've come into some money. A full tank of gas? Groceries? That's wonderful news. I hope you remembered that any and all gifts are considered income and are subject to immediate garnishment under the terms of your agreement." Isla's blood ran cold. "How do you know?" I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "Oh, I think you do," he chuckled, a sound devoid of all humor. "I have eyes everywhere, Isla. I also heard you had some rough-looking company last night. Let me give you some friendly advice. You're my investment, my property, and I don't like it when other people play with my toys. Get rid of them, or I'll have them removed. And then you and I will have a very serious discussion about your future and the future of your son's living arrangements. Do you understand me?" The threat, veiled but unmistakable, hung in the air. He was threatening to take Noah. The receiver slipped from her sweaty hand, clattering against the desk. She was hyperventilating, the walls of her small cubicle closing in. He knew. He was going to punish her for this flicker of hope. She ran from the office, ignoring the calls of her supervisor, and fled to her car. She drove, not towards home, but aimlessly, tears blurring her vision. The biker who had been tailing her followed, his presence a strange mixture of threat and comfort. She finally pulled over in a deserted park, her body shaking with sobs. The biker pulled up beside her, dismounting. He was older, with kind eyes that seemed out of place on his weathered face. He tapped on her window. She rolled it down, unable to speak. "Name's Padre," he said gently. "Riker sent me. Said you might need an ear. What did he say to you?" The money man. Through her tears, she told him everything. The phone call, the threats against her and Noah. Padre listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with every word. When she was finished, he simply nodded. "Stay here. Don't move." He walked away, pulling out his phone. A few miles away, Riker's phone buzzed. He listened to Padre's report, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the steering wheel of his truck. "He threatened the kid," Riker said, his voice dangerously quiet, to Grizz in the passenger seat. "He sent Cade." Grizz looked out the window. A black sedan had been tailing them for the last 10 minutes. Inside, for beefy men, Kate in the passenger seat, were trying to look casual and failing miserably. Croft hadn't wasted any time. He'd sent his dogs to sniff around, to send a message. "So what's the play, Prez?" Grizz asked, a slow, predatory grin spreading across his face. "Change of plans," Riker growled. "Recon is over. We're accelerating the timeline. Croft wants to play rough. He has no idea what rough is. He made 2 calls. The first was to Rook. Leak it. Everything. The ledger, the names, the whole filthy operation. Send it to every news outlet and the DA's office. Anonymously. Burn him to the ground. The second call was to the rest of the chapter. Saddle up. All of you. We're paying Mr. Croft a visit. But first, he said, looking in his rearview mirror at the black sedan, we need to take out the trash. Riker took a sharp, unexpected turn down a narrow industrial street, the black sedan following close behind. He led them into a labyrinth of abandoned warehouses and dead-end roads, a part of the city the police forgot existed. It was the club's turf. He screeched to a halt in the middle of a deserted loading dock area. Cade's sedan pulled up behind them, blocking any escape. Cade and his 3 goons got out, carrying tire irons and baseball bats. They fanned out, confident, smirking. "Lost, old man," Cade sneered, swaggering towards a truck. "Mr. Croft, want a word with your friend. And he wants you to deliver a message. Stay away. I've got a message for him, too," Riker said, stepping out of the truck. Grizz got out the other side, cracking his knuckles. From the shadows of the warehouses, engines roared to life. Dozens of them. Headlights flared, pinning Cade and his men in a circle of blinding light. From every alley and loading bay, Hell's Angels emerged on their bikes, forming a tight, impenetrable ring of chrome and leather. There were 50, 60, then 100 of them, their faces grim, their hands resting on handlebars or something heavier. Cade's smirk vanished, replaced by a dawning, sickening horror. He and his 3 men were standing in the center of a hornet's nest they had just kicked. They were hopelessly, terrifyingly outnumbered. "You want to send a message?" Riker asked, his voice echoing in the sudden silence. "Consider it received. Now it's our turn to reply." The circle of bikers tightened, the sound of their idling engines a low, rumbling promise of the violence to come. For Cade and his men, the day had just taken a very, very dark turn. The world had become a very small, very dangerous place. The confrontation at the loading dock was brutal, efficient, and short. Cade and his thugs, who had swaggered out of their sedan with the arrogance of schoolyard bullies, found themselves facing a tidal wave of disciplined fury. It wasn't a chaotic brawl. It was a systematic dismantling. Riker didn't even throw a punch. He stood, arms crossed, a silent judge presiding over the proceedings as his men went to work. Grizz moved like a force of nature, disarming 2 of the goons before they could even swing their weapons. The sounds of the one-sided fight were sickeningly blunt. The crack of bone, the thud of bodies hitting the pavement, the grunts of pain. The bikers moved with a chilling synchronicity, a pack of wolves taking down prey. Within 2 minutes, Cade and his crew were on the ground, groaning, disarmed, and thoroughly defeated. Cade, his face bloody and his bravado shattered, looked up at Riker with terrified eyes. "This is a mistake," he gasped. "Croft will. He'll bury you." Riker knelt beside him, his shadow covering the man completely. "You tell your boss," Riker said, his voice a low, cold whisper, that he threatened a child. "In our world, there is no coming back from that. You tell him we know everything. The ledger. The names. You tell him the storm is here. Now get out of our city and don't ever come back." He stood up. "Get them out of here," he commanded. Several bikers hauled the 4 men to their feet and shoved them back into their sedan, tossing their weapons in after them. One of the bikers had methodically slashed all 4 tires. "You can walk back to your master," Grizz grunted, slamming the driver's door shut. The Angels parted their ranks just enough for the crippled sedan to be pushed out of the industrial park, a monument to a failed intimidation attempt. The bikers watched it go, their faces hard and unreadable in the harsh glare of the headlights. The first phase of the counterattack was complete. Now for the main event. "Rook, what's the status?" Riker asked into his phone. Packages delivered, came a reply. The data dump hit the servers of every major news channel and the district attorney's office 5 minutes ago. The first news alerts are already popping up. The Shark Tank is officially chummed. A grim smile touched Riker's lips. Good. Now we go cut the head off the snake. The procession that rode from the industrial park to downtown was a spectacle of intimidating power. Over 180 motorcycles, a river of roaring steel and thunder, flowed through the city streets. Traffic stopped. Pedestrians stared, their phones held up to capture the incredible sight. This wasn't a joyride. It was a declaration of war, moving with unstoppable momentum toward its target. Gideon Croft was in his penthouse office on the top floor of the Croft Financial Building, pouring himself a glass of expensive scotch. He was pleased. Kate had reported that he had the bikers cornered. The problem would be dealt with. The woman would be reminded of her place, and his perfect, profitable system would continue uninterrupted. His phone buzzed with a news alert. He glanced at it, annoyed at the interruption. Then he froze. The headline was stark. Croft Financial accused of widespread predatory lending, racketeering. His glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. He frantically swiped through the article. It was all there. Scans of his secret ledger. Names. Dates. The entire scheme laid bare for the world to see. His personal emails, detailing the contempt he held for his clients, were quoted verbatim. His world was collapsing in real time. His desk phone began to ring, then his cell phone. His partners, his investors, his lawyers. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. And then he heard it, a low rumble coming from the street 40 floors below. It was a sound he had never heard in his sterile, soundproofed office. It grew louder and louder, a visceral, ground-shaking roar that seemed to make the very glass of his panoramic windows vibrate. He rushed to the window and looked down. The street below was a sea of motorcycles. They had surrounded his building, blocking all entrances and exits. Hell's Angels. He backed away from the window, his heart hammering against his ribs. Cade hadn't cornered them. They had cornered Cade, and now they were here for him. The private elevator to his office dinged. The doors slid open. Riker stood there, flanked by Grizz and a dozen other stone-faced bikers. They filled the elevator, their leather-clad forms a stark, gritty contrast to the polished steel and wood. They stepped out, their boots silent on the plush carpet. They didn't rush. They didn't shout. They simply advanced, a wall of silent menace, their collective presence sucking all the air out of the vast office. Croft, Riker said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of an executioner's sentence. Gideon stumbled backward, his back hitting the window. He was trapped. "What do you want?" he stammered, his bravado gone, replaced by the naked fear of a cornered animal. "My security will be here any second." "The police." "Your security is gone," Grizz said with a chilling grin. "And the police? I think they're going to be a little busy with the press conference the DA is about to hold." "About you." Riker stopped a few feet from him. He didn't need to get any closer. His eyes bored into Croft, stripping away the expensive suit, the facade of power, leaving only the pathetic, cowardly man underneath. "You build an empire on the backs of the desperate," Riker said, his voice resonating with cold fury. "You took their hope and you turned it into profit. You became a king in a kingdom of misery." He took a step closer. "And then you made a mistake. You went after one of ours. And you threatened her child." Croft began to blubber, a pathetic stream of denials and excuses. "It was just business. They knew the terms." "I didn't." "Silence," Riker commanded, and the single word cut through Croft's pathetic whining like a razor. "This is what's going to happen now. You're going to pick up that phone. You're going to call your lawyer, and you're going to authorize the immediate cancellation of every single debt in that ledger you kept. You're going to release every lien. You're going to clear every account. You're going to wipe the slate clean for Isla Reyes and for every other person you've trapped. Their homes, their cars, their lives, they belong to them again. All of them." Croft stared, his mind unable to process the demand. That's millions of dollars. I'll be ruined." "You were ruined the moment we found your name," Riker stated flatly. "This is just the paperwork. You have two choices. You do this, and maybe, just maybe, you'll have something left to bargain with when the federal indictments come down. Or you don't. And you and I will have a very different kind of negotiation. Right here. Right now. 44 is up. Riker gestured to the window. The message was clear. Trembling, his face ashen, Gideon Croft stumbled to his desk. His hand shook so badly he could barely dial the phone. As he began to speak, his voice cracking, giving the instructions that would dismantle his entire empire, Riker turned and walked away. His work here was done. The bikers followed him, leaving Croft to his financial ruin and the impending legal firestorm. As they rode the elevator down, the sounds of approaching sirens finally reached them. The police were arriving, but they weren't coming for the bikers. They were coming for the man in the penthouse. Down on the street, the Angels mounted their bikes. The mission was complete. They had not just saved one woman. They had liberated hundreds. They had faced down a modern monster and torn his kingdom apart. As Riker fired up his engine, the roar was joined by nearly 200 others, a triumphant chorus of victory. They had pushed a life back on track, and in doing so had reaffirmed the only code that mattered to them. You don't mess with the innocent. And you never, ever threaten a child. The thunder of their departure was the sound of justice delivered. Isla was still in her car at the park when her phone buzzed. It was a series of notifications, one after another. An email from Croft Financial Services with the subject line, "Account paid in full," an alert from her credit monitoring app, showing a sudden, dramatic jump in her score. A text message from her bank, notifying her that the automatic wage garnishment had been canceled. She stared at the screen, her mind reeling. It didn't make sense. It was impossible. Then another alert popped up, this one from a local news station. She clicked on it. The face of Gideon Croft, looking haggard and defeated, was being led from his office building in handcuffs. The headline scrolled across the bottom of the screen. CEO arrested in massive predatory lending scandal. She read the article, her eyes widening with every paragraph. An anonymous source had leaked everything. The secret ledgers, the illegal practices, the network of shell companies. Hundreds of victims were about to have their debts cleared as part of a massive criminal and civil investigation. She was free. The weight that had been crushing her for years, a weight so immense she had forgotten what it felt like to not carry it, simply vanished. A sob escaped her, but it wasn't one of fear or despair. It was a raw, cathartic cry of pure, unadulterated relief. The bikers. It had to be them. They had done this. This impossible, miraculous thing. She looked up as a familiar rumble approached. It was Riker, his motorcycle idling as he pulled up beside her car. He took off his helmet, his expression unreadable. "It's over," he said, his voice a low gravel. "He won't be bothering you again." Isla got out of her car, her legs unsteady. She looked at this intimidating, terrifying man who had just handed her back her life. "Why?" she whispered, the only word she could manage. "Why would you do all this for me?" Riker was silent for a moment, his gaze distant. He looked at her, but he was seeing someone else. He was seeing Dana. "A long time ago, I failed to help someone who needed it," he said, his voice rough with an old pain. "I told myself I wouldn't make that mistake again. You needed help. We helped. It's the code." He looked away, uncomfortable with the raw emotion of the moment. "Your car's seen better days. That engine sounds rough. Bring it by the clubhouse tomorrow. Some of the boys will take a look at it." And with that, he put his helmet back on, fired up his engine, and rode away, leaving Isla standing in the sunlight, a free woman. The next day, she hesitantly drove her sputtering sedan to the address Riker had given her. It was a large, nondescript warehouse in an industrial part of town. As she pulled up, the huge bay door rolled open. Inside was a full-service auto shop, gleaming with tools and lifts, and filled with bikers wrenching on motorcycles and cars. Grizz met her at the door, a greasy rag in his hand and a wide grin on his face. "Right on time. Pop the hood, little mama. Let's see what we're working with for the rest of the day." Her car was swarmed by a team of surprisingly meticulous mechanics. They didn't just look at the engine. They replaced the bald tires, fixed the broken air conditioner, changed the oil, and buffed out the dents. They worked with a cheerful camaraderie, trading jokes and insults, their gruff exteriors belying their focused expertise. Noah, whom she had brought with her, was treated like a little prince. A giant biker named Tiny gave him a tour of the motorcycles, letting him sit on a polished Harley and gently explaining what all the chrome parts did. Noah was in heaven. Isla watched, a sense of belonging settling over her for the first time in years. These men, feared by the outside world, had created a sanctuary for her. They weren't just fixing her car, they were healing a part of her soul. While they worked, Number sat down with her at a makeshift table with a laptop. "All right, let's talk about your future," he said, his tone all business. "Croft is finished, but you still need a better job. Your resume is thin, but you're smart and you're a hard worker. One of our brothers owns a logistics company, a legitimate one. He needs a new office manager. The pay is double what you were making before Croft's garnishments. It comes with full benefits and a daycare stipend. The job is yours if you want it." Isla was speechless. A real job, a living wage, a future. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say you'll take it," Numbers grunted. "The interview is a formality. You start Monday." By the end of the day, her car was running better than it ever had. The fridge in the clubhouse kitchen was stocked, and someone had thrown burgers on a massive grill. The entire chapter was there, celebrating not just their victory over Croft, but the simple act of doing good. Riker watched from a distance as Isla laughed, a genuine, carefree sound, while watching Noah play tag with a young biker prospect. The hollow ache in his chest, the one that had been there since Dana died, felt a little less empty. He hadn't been able to save his sister, but he had saved Isla. He had given her son a future. It wasn't redemption, not really, but it was something close. It was purpose. Grizz walked over, handing him a beer. "She's gonna be all right, Prez," Riker nodded, taking a long drink. "Yeah, Grizz. She is." He looked at his men, his family. They were outlaws, misfits, and thugs. But they were also protectors, saviors, and, in their own twisted way, heroes. They were the savage justice the world sometimes needed. Months passed. Isla thrived at her new job. With the daycare stipend, she was able to get Noah into a good preschool. She moved out of the Millgate apartments and into a small, clean house with a tiny backyard. She was saving money. She was happy. She became a regular fixture at the clubhouse, not as a victim, but as family. She helped Numbers with the club's bookkeeping, organized their charity toy runs, and made sure the younger prospects ate a decent meal. She had found her strength, not just in herself, but in the unlikely brotherhood that had adopted her. One sunny Saturday afternoon, she was at a clubhouse barbecue. Noah was helping Grizz polish the chrome on his bike. Riker was sitting at a picnic table, quietly observing the controlled chaos. Isla walked over and sat down across from him. "I never really got to thank you," she said softly. "Not properly," Riker just shrugged. "No thanks needed." "Yes, there is," she insisted. "You didn't just give me my life back, Riker. You show me what family is. You show me that there are still good people, even if they hide behind leather and tattoos. You saved me." He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the deep well of pain behind his hard eyes. "We save each other," he said quietly. "That's all it is." He stood up, placing a hand on her shoulder for a brief moment. It was a gesture of profound respect and connection. He then walked over to his bike, the chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. He swung a leg over the saddle, and the engine roared to life, a familiar and now comforting thunder. As he and a dozen other riders prepared to head out, a rolling wave of power and purpose, Isla watched them go. They were feared by many, but to her, they were saviors. They were the brutal, beautiful, and necessary force that had pushed her life back on track, a roaring testament to the fact that sometimes the most heroic hearts beat beneath the most fearsome exteriors. And she knew, with a certainty that filled her entire being, that she was no longer a victim. She was a survivor, and she was, in her own way, one of them. The roar of their engines was no longer a sound of fear. It was the sound of freedom. Her freedom.